As the Toronto Blue Jays young stars continue to shine this MLB season, the Jays have a huge decision to make going into the offseason regarding what their future third baseman, as well as some other positions, will be. And a recent article by Ken Rosenthal has outlined what the market is looking like, and this could have some huge implications for the Toronto Blue Jays going forward. And one of their potential targets could change everything for the Jays if they're able to sign him this offseason. So to break down that report and what this means going forward for the Jays on this episode of Jays Digest, welcome in everybody. I'm your host, Nick Gosse. We have a lot to go over today. Now, obviously, the Toronto Blue Jays are still playing baseball, not necessarily meaningful baseball. They're trying to sweep the series tonight against the Angels. It'll be a pretty fun series and fun game to watch. It's been a fun series, sorry. And obviously, we have a lot of the young guys coming up. You have Will Wagner up. You have Joey LaPerfido. You have Spencer Horwitz, who was called up earlier. Even guys like Leo Jimenez, who are playing in the absence of Bo Bichette. But now the big question going forward is going to be what their plan is this offseason. And of course, as the offseason gets closer, as we actually head into the offseason, we're going to have videos covering every single bit of reports and news and rumors that comes out. But a recent article by Ken Rosenthal highlighted some things, and I want to discuss it with you all, and I want to get your opinions on this, as well as the Alex Bregman situation, who has been absolutely tearing it up for the Astros. And this dropped just yesterday. So Ken Rosenthal said the market for third baseman this offseason should be very interesting. Besides the Astros and Giants, the teams with obvious needs include the Mariners, Diamondbacks, and the Yankees. No mention of the Jays. Now, if you read the article, it is on the Athletic, so it's paywall. But basically, they highlight some of the targets for a lot of these teams, basically saying that the third baseman market is going to be pretty hot this offseason, and focusing specifically on Alex Bregman. And they didn't mention the Jays as teams with obvious needs. Now, the reason for this, if you actually read the article, it's basically because the Jays aren't playoff contenders this year. So they, you can see here on the top, Ken just listed 3 current playoff contenders and called it a day. There are going to be several other teams, including the Jays, who want to upgrade at third base. So we know that the Jays are going to be among these teams, even though Ken didn't specifically mention them, because obviously right now they're not really in the playoff race or in major discussion not globally, but like across the MLB. But this brings up a very interesting question now. And he mentioned the Mariners. They're not going to be able to spend big. And you look at what the Jays can do this offseason. They obviously cleared a lot of payroll by trading half of their roster at the trade deadline and cleared up a lot of space to get under the cap threshold of the CBT. But as well as getting under the CBT, they're also now able to spend big, in theory, in this offseason on a couple of big free agents. Now, names that come to mind, Alex Bregman is going to be a big one. Juan Soto. Now, I'm not going to say the Jays are going to be, I think they're going to be all in on both of those guys personally. But again, you look at a lot of these players and you can think it's going to be very interesting. You also have other players as well that, not necessarily superstars, but the 2 big superstars, Juan Soto heading into free agency, is obviously with the Yankees. But focusing on third base, we're looking at Alex Bregman. And I want to discuss him for a little bit and kind of discuss how the way the Jays are handling their current situation, they're calling up a bunch of young guys. They're seeing who can stick at the MLB level, because they have the luxury. Now, obviously, this season has been a disaster. It's been an absolute failure, but they have the luxury by calling up and by being in a very non-favorable spot. They don't have to worry about winning games necessarily. They can call up a lot of the young guys and see if their young guys can stick next season, which will help them determine what their plan will be going forward into the offseason. And you look at Alex Bregman over his last 8 games, he's been crushing it. We all know the Astros have been on an absolute tear, and Bregman's been one of the best hitters in baseball since the All-Star break. You look into it now, and if you rewind back to even in the offseason, back to November, you had the Jays linked to a Alex Bregman potential trade. This is back from November 29th. Could the Astros star Alex Bregman be a solution to the Blue Jays' third base conundrum, looking at the risk, potential rewards, and what it might take to bring Bregman to Toronto? And this was highlighted basically because the Astros were shopping Alex Bregman for a period of time this offseason. We knew Matt Chapman was going to be shipped off or signed elsewhere at that point. So it was an interesting kind of discussion about what the Jays are going to do with the third baseman position. Now, ultimately, they went with a hybrid of Isaiah Kiner-Falefa. Now with, they have different guys, Ernie Clement, who could play there. You have a bunch of different guys playing there on a daily basis now. But it's a very interesting thing. You know that the Jays were linked to them in the past, and Ross Atkins, it's been reported that he has interest in Alex Bregman and has had interest in Alex Bregman in the past. So the question is now, could they look to bring him in the offseason, especially given the way that their positional kind of standpoints are going? So you think about it from the infield perspective, you have Will Wagner now, who could pencil himself in, at least this season. He's playing second base. We haven't seen enough of Will Wagner to see what he could actually be going forward. But you have Vladimir Guerrero Jr. at first base. You have Spencer Horwitz, who could play DH and maybe play second base next year. But the big hole is at third base, and they're going to need to make a pretty big move. We know for them to compete next year, and Ross Atkins basically admitted it at his press conference, and Mark Shapiro as well, they need to make big changes. And next season, they need to add some big bats. They need to do a lot of things. Now, whether that's in the form of Juan Soto, whether that's in the form of Alex Bregman, 2 like superstar type players, or whether that's in the form of different guys, smaller pieces like they did this offseason, which I'm hoping is not the way they go. that'll dictate and determine what kind of plan they have going into the offseason and throughout the offseason as well. But if you're looking at Alex Bregman, this is a guy that screams the Toronto Blue Jays. And some people on Twitter and some people around Jays Nation and myself as well, you're seeing Alex Bregman tear it up and you're saying, hey, this is the time for them to go and swing for the fences and get a guy like Alex Bregman in the offseason to play into an everyday role next year, because we need some more veterans. Obviously, we have a lot of young guys. We have some guys coming up. The MLB Pipeline has updated their prospect system. I'll have a video on that soon. They have a very interesting listing for the Toronto Blue Jays prospects. But you're looking at the Jays, and the Blue Jays are in an interesting spot heading into the offseason. They need to trade. They need to make some big signings. They maybe need to make some trades, some big shuffles. But at the end of the day, they need to address the third base position. I'm curious to see what you guys think about it. Do you want the Jays to swing for the fences, go for a guy like Juan Soto and Alex Bregman? In theory, they have enough money to go for both of those guys. They have a lot of cap space. Now, whether or not they will do that is up in the air. Whether or not that will hinder them going forward for other different positions of need, positional standpoints, and bullpen is still up in the air. But if they can swing for the fences and at least get one big bat this offseason, it's something they need to do, it's something they should do, and it's something that the market is going to be pretty hot, but there's not that many teams that are going to be going for a guy like Alex Bregman that can outspend the Toronto Blue Jays. Now, obviously, whether or not Alex Bregman wants to play in Toronto is up to him, but there's not a lot of teams that can outspend the Jays in that way. Now, you look at guys like Ernie Clement. Now, this is Ernie Clement this season. Obviously, he's having a pretty decent year. He can play third base. Some people are saying, hey, just pencil him in as an everyday third baseman, given the way that he's performed over the past couple of months here. I don't think Ernie Clement can be an everyday player on a team that has World Series aspirations. It's nothing against Ernie Clement. He is obviously 29 years old. He's not a prospect anymore. But I think if the Jays go into next season with Ernie Clement as their starting shortstop or starting third baseman in this case, you're setting yourself up for a similar year to this year where the offense severely underperforms. And obviously there's some other underperforming as well from the pitching staff and the bullpen, some injuries, some disasters there, Bichette as well. But you cannot go into the season with Ernie Clement as your everyday shortstop or third baseman just because of the lack of upside, the lack of offense. This team needs offense, and Alex Bregman brings offense, and he's been linked to him in the past. There's some talk about it now. I would like to bring Alex Bregman to Toronto. And you look at Will Wagner, who had a great game yesterday again, the fifth player in franchise history to record 5 hits in his first 2 games. Will Wagner, obviously, and this, I'm not saying Will Wagner is going to be even on the opening day roster next season, but the point is, they're trying out all these young players to see what their biggest position of need and their biggest hole in their team is for next season and heading into the offseason, because they have time to see what they have in Loperfido. Can he stick at left field every single day? Will Wagner, can he be an everyday consistent player? We saw with David Schneider last year. He came in, crushed it, a better start to his career than Will Wagner, who's having an unbelievable start to his career. But then he started to tail off, and they need to see if these things are sustainable so they can address the biggest positions of need going into the offseason. And again, we're not quite at the offseason yet, but I saw some rumblings about Bregman, about Ross Atkins, and about just the third base market in general. I'm very curious to see what you all think in the comment section below. Do you want to see Alex Bregman? Do you want to see them swing for the fences? We're going to have tons of videos covering all that, of course, as the season comes to a close. But it's interesting now, and it's a good time to talk about it because of all the young guys and how they are going to project into the Jays' future. But let us know in the comments what your thoughts are. See you soon.